As part of building the ultimate VR cave, I'm also going to be building a digital twin of that cave, which is where I'm going to be holding events and client meetings, and it's going to try and replicate the same shape and size as my VR cave, and then I'm going to add some textures to that and make it into my own custom VR office space. I thought it might be interesting to show everybody not just how I build the actual physical VR cave and the soundproofing and networking and all that stuff, which is in these previous videos, but also how you could go in and build the virtual environment to match that. So to begin with, I've actually just started to learn how to use Unity and how to import the SteamVR tools and the plugins so that I could start building this virtual environment. Now, the first few videos in this series are going to follow pretty closely to some existing tutorials that were written about a year ago by a fellow named Valim. I highly recommend, if you're interested in VR development, check out his channel, check out his tutorials. And I'm going to be working with SteamVR. That's the platform I prefer, so it's going to be a combination of SteamVR and Unity. Now, unfortunately, Unity has dropped native support for OpenVR, which is the SDK that SteamVR was using. That means if you're using a tutorial that's any more than a few months old, it's not going to be using probably the most recent version of Unity. So this is a very important step. You have to make sure that when you install the Unity Hub, you then go and add the Unity version 2018.4. whatever, but it has to be the 2018.4 version. You can't use a 2019 version yet because that uses a different plugin framework and it doesn't support OpenVR right now. This could change in a couple of months because Valve is supposed to be releasing their own OpenVR plugin for Unity, but until that happens, you have to make sure you're using a slightly older version of Unity. And here I'm installing the 2018. I actually spent about an hour trying to figure out how to use Unity 2019 version before I finally just went back and installed the old one. So once it's installed, when you create a project, make sure you hit that drop down and select 2018 as the Unity version you want to use. And then you just pick a project name and go ahead and hit create. It takes a little while to load up, but once it does, your window layout might be a little different than mine. You can go ahead and drag tabs wherever you like. Now, once I have them where I want, I'm going to go ahead and create a plane, and this is going to be your basic play space. I'm going to add a cube to that plane, and just going to adjust it, move around a bit, and move my camera in nice and close, and you can see the camera window shows what the camera is seeing. I'm going to make my way down to the Assets tab, and I'm going to create an asset just to give the cube a little bit of color. So there's a material there. I'm going to set the name to it to red, and I'm going to jump in and change the color in the top right corner there to just a red color, just so I can distinguish the cube itself from the plane that it's sitting over top of. And to set the color, you just have to drag that material and then drop it onto the cube. Now I want to add support for VR, so I'm going to go into the project settings and select player. In later versions of Unity, there's another menu item down at the bottom called XR Plugin Management. If you see that, then you're in a later version of Unity and you probably won't be able to use OpenVR at this stage. Under the Player tab, you're going to look for Virtual Reality Supported. It's a small checkbox. You might have to expand your window. Click on that. And then you're going to get a small pop-up that's going to be installing some scripts. And as soon as that's finished, you're going to look for the OpenVR. You see Oculus there, and there's OpenVR. I'm going to select that one because that's the one you need to use if you want to develop in SteamVR right now. If you hit play at this stage, that should launch the SteamVR app in the background. And you can do that just to make sure that everything seems to be connected correctly. Next, I want to head over to the Asset Store, which I already have in a tab here. I'm going to connect up to the store, and I'm going to find the SteamVR plugin and make sure that it's installed. So you just use the search bar to find it. SteamVR is what you got to type in. And there it is. And if you haven't downloaded it yet, you'll download it first. But if you have downloaded it yet, which I did a while back, you can just hit import, and that's going to import this into the existing project. I'm going to get a pop-up right away that's going to show you all the assets. You can just import all those assets by hitting the import button and then let it continue. And you may get the occasional pop-up that asks you to accept some changes to some settings. I just typically accept all those. Next, we're going to add a player camera. So if you go down to the Assets tab, you can type in player, and you can see two of them. Click and drag the one with the arrows into your scene. And that's going to be where your player is going to be in the actual environment. You can go ahead and delete the main camera. You're not going to need that anymore. And here I'm just repositioning the player so that they can see the cube in front of them. Now you can go ahead and hit play on the game, and that is going to launch it. And it's also going to give you a pop-up, because it's the first time, saying that your player doesn't seem to have actions mapped to it, but Unity is going to take care of that for you. So if you just hit yes on each of these menu buttons, it's going to figure out how to map all those actions. So you see here there's a pop-up that says what it's about to do, hit accept all, and it's going to add all those scripts so that your player can move around the environment and can do some basic actions. So save and generate, and then close down that window. This step can take a long time. If it seems like it's hanging, don't worry, just wait it out. Once it's all done, if you hit play now, you can go ahead and put on your headset and you'll find yourself in the environment. You may have to get past a few more of those accept all pop-ups, but here I am in the environment. I've got my Valve Index controllers. You can see I'm testing all the finger motions to make sure they all work, and they do, and it's very responsive. And I'm just sort of amazed that it's actually fairly easy to get up to this point. But at this stage, I can't move around, I can't do much with the environment, and I'm going to show you how to add movement controls next. Before you add the movement controls, make sure you hit stop on the game player. To add some basic movement, I'm going to find the teleporter asset and drag that into the scene. If you launch the game after adding the teleporting asset, right away you can see on your controllers you have the teleport option, which lets you sort of move around that little red square trying to find a place to teleport to. Unfortunately, until you set a plane or a spot to teleport to, a teleport area, you can't actually use the teleporting yet. So what I'm going to do now is add a second plane over top of the first plane, which is going to be a teleport area which you can jump to using the teleport functionality. So if you have that new plane selected, you can go into the scene and use the arrow to move it just slightly above the existing plane. You don't want too far above, just a little bit above, and that's going to allow you to click on those different areas on top of that plane to move around. Now with your new plane selected, you can go to the Add Component button on the right hand side there and add the teleport area component to that plane. Once it's added, you're going to see that that whole plane is going to light up with those squares, and that just indicates that those are spots you can jump to on top of that plane. Now if you hit play, you can put on your headset and try and move around. Now my hands are just at my side, so you don't see them in the picture, but I'm using the snap turning to turn, and then the controller has a teleport button on it, and I'm just using that to move around and kind of see sort of how I jump from spot to spot depending on where the square is. Now make sure you, again, stop the game player before you move on to the next step, which is going to be adding some objects to interact with in the scene. We'll add a cube to the scene. I'm going to rename that cube Grab Cube. And now I'm going to add two components, the interactable component and the throwable component. And that's going to basically load up all the scripts for that cube so that the player can both grab and throw it. I'm also going to position the cube and size it, just reduce the scale to make it a little bit smaller in the scene. Now I'm going to hit play and go put on my headset and see what I can do with my new interactable cube. First thing I had to do was find the cube because I actually had hidden it behind the larger cube. But once I found it, I could reach out and pick it up by gripping with the Valve Index controllers, which is really handy. I could toss it. It felt like it had some weight. And then I happened to notice that there's a sun in the sky, which I didn't realize before. And I really hope you get a sense of just how straightforward this was. In the next few videos, I'm going to expand on this environment and actually create some walls, add some textured assets, and really make this space feel like a virtual office. As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoy this content, subscribe below, leave some comments, share some experiences if you are a developer and you're just getting into it, or if you have no experience developing in VR at all and found this useful, let me know because I'd love to make more of this content.